Welcome to Just Start, Get Visible, your go-to resource of the journey to becoming more visible in a way that feels right for you. Hello there, and welcome back to yet another episode of Just Start, Get Visible. It's Jacqueline here. And as pleasant as my voice sounds, and even if you are taking the opportunity to take a look at this particular episode on video, as pleasant as I'm forcing my face to look right now, we're going to be talking about a subject that doesn't always feel so pleasant. And before we dive into all the things that I'm going to give you tips, tools, resources, and storytelling, I want you to mentally scour your mind and thinking, what R letter word makes me feel some kind of way? I know that my R letter word that makes me feel some kind of way is rejection. Because who likes rejection? Perhaps we've built up a tolerance for rejection, but who likes it? We're going to pick up where we left off a bit because in episode number 267, which was just the episode back, we talked to Kat Calvin. And we talked about finding your voice and speaking clearly, honestly, and apologetically in your own tone. And in reality, when you do this, sometimes people don't pick up what you're putting down, right? And one reality that comes with using your voice is this. Eventually, you'll experience rejection. Somebody will say no. An opportunity won't work out. A proposal won't be accepted. A promotion won't happen. An idea won't be received the way that you hoped that it would be received. And if we're not careful, we can begin to believe that rejection is something about who we are instead of simply what happened. It's a part of leadership. It's a part of growth. And most importantly, rejection is this. And I invite you to take these words, use them, reflect on them when you come into a situation where rejection has happened. I want you to remember that rejection is information, not identity. So let's talk about that. I want you to think about the first tip, and I want you to allow this to sink in very deeply before we go any further. And knowing that, and you coming here, embracing the tips, tools, research, storytelling, the opportunities that we have to talk to other people, I'm hoping that you choose visibility. But if and when you choose visibility, you will experience rejection. Okay. And I hoping that somebody hasn't hit the end button or you've scrolled away from this episode by me telling you this, because my job is to tell you the truth. Yes, I want visibility for you in the way that feels right for you. But yes, and you deciding that you're going to get visible in a way that feels right for you, which comes with a ton of different perks, you will experience rejection. And I wish I could tell you that using your voice guarantees acceptance in all of your spaces, but it doesn't. And if we're just being honest here, you should expect that. Because think about some of the posts that you ever seen on social, maybe even just the most wholesome posts where someone found the bad in it. It was just like, hey, I was just posting about bunny rabbits and babies. Like, what do you mean you mad that I wasn't posting about turtles and elephants? That's not what we were talking about. So in all the spaces that we're in, there's going to be some counter, even if it's a real person or if it's a bot. So I love to tell you that using your voice guarantees acceptance. It does not, right? But what I know for sure is that visibility creates opportunities. Visibility also creates exposure. And I encourage you to make sure that you are going after exposure in meaningful ways. And exposure means that sometimes people are going to disagree with you. You are not always 100% right, or you're not always saying something or going to say something that is going to land on someone else's ears the way that they want it to. Sometimes people will overlook you. They'll overlook us. Sometimes they'll say no for stuff that has to do with their particular life and not necessarily ours. Sometimes they'll choose somebody else for an opportunity. And sometimes you'll do everything right, everything, and you still not receive the outcome that you wanted. And I want to offer a bit of empathy in saying that that's difficult. It's hard because most of us, including me, naturally interpret rejection personally. Even when I dig myself out of it, when, I get some rejection, it hits, it stings, I can dig myself out of it fairly quickly. But I do take it personally initially because a lot of the things that I decide to commit my time, my energy, my resources to, they're personal for me. I want them to be successful. And some of us might think, you know what, I'm not good enough. I must not belong here. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I should stop trying. Maybe I should quit. But rejection, to be clear, isn't proof that you shouldn't continue something. In fact, it's often evidence that you're participating, right? It's evidence that you're doing something. There's some movement that's happening overall. Think about the people who never risk anything, right? They rarely experience rejection because there's nothing to reject. So they're going along at this pace of life that is sometimes well beneath what they're able to accomplish because they haven't taken any risks. They haven't said, hey, I want to raise my hand and do X. But they also very rarely experience growth, right? They don't try new things. They don't go after new things. They don't even know what they're capable of and what's possible because they're not taking risks. They're not getting visible. If you are visible, rejection is not abnormal. It's expected. And we can do hard things, which leads me to want us to talk a little bit about our section two. And it is something that I've heard from several leaders that I greatly admire. And it is that it is important for us to separate feedback from self worth. When I launched my second book called The Unexpected Leader, Discovering the Leader Within You back in 2022, which is amazing because we're coming up on our 5 years in just a short while, I had a fireside chat with Jacqueline Welch. Jacqueline Welch actually interviewed me during the book launch. And she talked about this. She talked about how important it is to separate feedback from self worth. And because she's in a position that is highly aligned with human resources at the chief level, if you will, she understands how important it is for you to separate your feedback from your self worth. One of the healthiest things that we can learn is how to separate what happened from who we are. Okay. Because these are not the same thing. Let's not get this conflated. Receiving a no does not mean that you are a no, that you are not worthy, that you're not a great person. Experiencing failure does not mean that you are a failure. It's simply an experience that you have with the data, with the information, with the situation that's at hand. And receiving criticism does not mean that you are inadequate. It's feedback. Not being selected does not mean you are unworthy. Sometimes rejection simply means not now, not this opportunity, not this audience, not this season, for reasons that we may find out the reasons for and reasons that we may never. And while feedback can absolutely be valuable, feedback should not inform your growth, right? It does not determine your worth overall. Your worth existed before this opportunity, and it will exist after this opportunity. And it still exists many years, days, months into the future. And that's a really important distinction that we have to separate whatever the feedback is from who you are as an individual. Because when self worth becomes attached to outcomes, every disappointment feels devastating. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't get that opportunity. I must be terrible. I must not be worthy. But I encourage you to embrace that when identity remains anchored, when your identity is anchored in something, you're clear about this. Your values are X, I am X. Disappointment becomes easier to process because you're able to say, like with the clear mind, this outcome isn't necessarily who I am. This outcome is a byproduct of a lot of different decisions that this particular scenario was based upon, right? I invite you in every situation, particularly those where you feel a rejection, is to ask yourself, which is our number 3 for today, what can this no teach me? What can it teach me? One of the reasons I say that rejection is information is because every experience contains something we can learn, every single one. Not every rejection means you need to change because there are other factors that might be in play that you know or don't know. But some rejections can reveal some things that I think that are worth us talking about. It can reveal areas for improvement. It can reveal new approaches. It can reveal skills that you need to develop, relationships that you need to strengthen, questions to ask. Because sometimes the answer is keep going exactly as you are, right? Sometimes the answer is make adjustments. And sometimes the answer is this opportunity just wasn't meant for me. And now with more information, I don't even want it, right? The key is learning to become curious instead of deflated. Like why? And giving yourself permission to ask why. We won't always get the answers on the other side of why, but it is important for us to inquire because sometimes we can get these tea leaves, these little pieces of the puzzle where we're able to say, you know what? I can acquire this skill. I can go in this direction, etc. Instead of you asking what the typical question is, which is, what's wrong with me, right? I want you to try asking a much more impactful question. And that's, what can I learn from this? That single shift, right, changes the entire experience. It changes from, why is this happening to me, to what can I learn from this? Because curiosity, it creates growth overall. If you're curious, if you want to ask questions, if you want to probe, versus just shutting down. Shame creates paralysis. Shame makes us go and hide out somewhere, never to do anything brave again, never raising your hand for visibility opportunities. I want you to get in the habit of building resilience after disappointment. Because let's just be all the way honest here. Even when we understand all of this intellectually focused things, all the things that typically happen to us, when we understand all of it, rejection still hurts. Even when I can give you all these tips, all these things to say, hey, intellectually, this is why this happened, or Jacqueline, this is the list of questions that you should ask yourself. Rejection still hurts. Okay. I'm not going to be naive in assuming that it doesn't hurt, even when we got these frameworks that we can bounce things off of. Disappointment is real. I've been disappointed many times before, and I suspect I'm going to be disappointed again in the future. And I know that resilience doesn't mean pretending that you're unaffected. And I'm not asking you to be so resilient to the point where your feelings aren't hurt, because sometimes they might be hurt in the world of rejection. But resilience mean allowing yourself to feel disappointed without allowing disappointment to define you. You don't have to rush past it. Sometimes we got to sit in the disappointment for a second. Oh, I didn't get that opportunity. Like, I didn't get a chance to do that, right? Sometimes it's important for us to not rush past it. It's okay for you to not pretend, or for you to not pretend that you're fine, because sometimes you're upset, you're disappointed. Man, I really was hoping for that. I was hoping for that to happen. You don't have to immediately bounce back. Perhaps you need a couple days. Some of us need a couple months, depending on what it is. Sometimes resilience looks like taking a walk, right? Walking off the disappointment if you can, talking with a trusted friend, like allowing them to let you have this safe space sometimes to just ramble. And I have friends like that, friends that I'll call and say, hey, I just need to ramble. I actually don't even really need you to say anything. I just want to have the space to safely ramble. And there's something about being in the presence of someone that I trust, where I'm rambling about something that I'm disappointed about, where in the end, I feel like I just got it out, right? Or just reflecting on what happened. Resting. Resting is another way for us to heal from what I often call disappointment. Trying again, like when you're ready, not necessarily to rush past it and say, I got to start this again next week, but healing from it, resting, trying again when you're ready. Resilience isn't about being emotionless, because sometimes the further and harder we push down disappointment, the more it's just festering and growing. So the next time we're disappointed, sometimes our reactions are even worse, because we have not allowed ourselves to heal from whatever that disappointment is by letting the emotions out. It's truly about refusing to let temporary disappointment become a permanent conclusion. Oof, like I love that statement. It's about refusing to let temporary disappointment, something that's temporary, is just here for maybe a short time, not letting that become your permanent conclusion, because you can get back up. You can walk it off. You can reflect on what went well, what didn't go so well, and you can get back in the game when you're ready to. Because one rejection should never have the authority to determine your future. Don't you allow rejection to take up that much space in your world. I want you to, in our section 5, I want you to keep using your voice, even when rejection happens. One of the greatest dangers of rejection is silence, because you feel like, oh, that stung so hard, I'm not going to say anything again. I'm not going to write again. I'm not going to get visible in a way that feels right for me ever again. After enough disappointments, people begin to shrink. Okay, they stop sharing their ideas. They stop applying. They stop raising their hands. They stop speaking. They stop trying, because they no longer care, like they've lost that fire, but because they're trying to protect themselves. And I do understand that, because that feeling, that disappointment feeling, it can cut really deep. But while that protection feels understandable, it also becomes very costly, because think about the lost opportunities. The world loses something when people like you stop using their voice. Right? Kat Calvin's work reminds us of that. It reminds us that meaningful change often requires persistence. Many important ideas are initially ignored, and then people come back and come back again and come back again and fail and come back again, right? Many missions, right, whatever the mission that it is it encounters resistance. People that are like, no first, that's not going to work. I don't know how that's ever going to work. And many leaders, including me, we hear no before we hear yes. We hear a lot of no's. And sometimes the truth is that the only difference between people who eventually create impact and those who don't is just this: they keep going, not perfectly, never seeking perfection, not fearlessly, right? I'd be scared sometimes, but consistently, right? Because your voice doesn't lose its value because someone failed to recognize it. Keep using it. How are you going to give that one person that much power to say no and then you go and you never try again? I always say never let one person have that much power in you pursuing the dreams and the things that you truly want to do and getting visible in a way that says right for in a way that's right for you. Because rejection, especially one rejection, it does not get the final word. One of the most powerful truths we can remember is this: is that people's responses are not always accurate measurements of our potential. Okay? Because they bring other things to the table. They bring their stress to the table. They bring their rejection to the table. They bring their perspective to the table, which might not be your perspective. Sometimes people just don't understand. They don't understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish or what you're trying to get across. Sometimes the timing isn't right. There's so many things that I've launched that the timing was not right, and I had to come back, take it off the shelf, launch it again, say it again. Sometimes priorities are different. Sometimes circumstances are completely beyond our control. And sometimes life directs us toward opportunities that we couldn't yet see. So maybe it's time to say it, whatever it is, again. I've learned that some of the things that once felt like devastating disappointments eventually became blessings in disguise. Because if something would have launched, would have went the way that I thought it should go years ago, months ago, weeks ago, then quite frankly, it would not have landed the way that it ultimately could have if it would have launched when I thought that it should. When we allow things to naturally progress, accept what they are at the time, then ask ourselves some questions, reflect, and come back to it, we get the chance to strengthen things, to build things up, to make them stronger. And I do recognize, though, that rejection never feels good, right? And it's not that these devastating appointments that we disappointments that we may experience in time are always blessings in disguise. Sometimes it's somebody else's things that they're bringing to the table, where perhaps they're not being as forward thinking or optimistic or even as open to your ideas or your perspectives overall. Okay. And it's not because rejection feels good, but because rejection sometimes revealed something better. So I don't want you to allow a temporary outcome to become your permanent identity, because your story is still being written. Like, you're still writing your story, you're still writing your opportunities. But if we let rejection shut us down, if we let rejection keep us from being visible in a way that feels right to us, we miss out on those segments of our story that the world is worthy of hearing and benefiting from. So I want you to think about this episode as we recap today, all focused on the fact that rejection is just information. It is not your identity. I want you to accept that if you choose visibility, you will choose rejection, meaning that you will experience it. It's going to happen. But guess what? We can do hard things. I want you to get in the habit of separating feedback from self-worth. Because just because someone gave you some feedback doesn't mean that you aren't worthy, right? That you aren't capable. Remember, they bring tons of other things to the table that may or may not be things that need to be a decision point in what your outcomes are. I want you to ask yourself, what can this no teach me? All right, I heard a no. What can it teach me? What can I do better? Was this the right time? Versus just like, okay, I heard a no and I'm going over in my corner somewhere. I want you to accept that building resilience after disappointment is something that will benefit you well. Because if you haven't gotten a no, right? If you haven't experienced rejection or disappointment, it's probably going to happen. But I want you to build resilience versus saying, you know what, this is taking me down. Somebody said no, and I'm never going to go after the things that I truly want to do again. I want you to keep using your voice. You deserve it. And I want you to keep using your visibility pockets that really matter and mean the most to you. Because when I say voice, I know sometimes people automatically think, I don't want to get on a stage, Jacqueline. I don't want to be in front of a bunch of people. And so that's the reason why I say visibility, which can mean your voice. It can mean your writing. Right? It can mean you being visible in a way that feels right for you. I need you to remember that rejection does not get the final word in your life. It does not. I want you to be someone who takes the time to reflect, okay? And reflect on questions like these. What rejection am I still carrying? Because for some of us, we're not starting things that we want to do because we're still carrying that old rejection. What story have I attached to that experience? And we talked about the stories that we have to tell ourselves back in the episode that I had with Dallas Gordon. It was phenomenal because some of us are telling ourselves these stories that are honestly not true, or stories that are expired and they're not serving us well anymore. So, what story do you have attached to that experience? That, oh my God, the world still says that I didn't do good and I failed at this, when the world has probably moved on and they're not even thinking about it anymore. I'm curious about what would change if you viewed that rejection as information instead of identity. I want you to take some time with those questions because sometimes healing from disappointment, from rejection, it begins when we stop allowing old disappointments to define who we are. We're busy carrying this stuff, carrying this burden, carrying the shame, when in fact, the world might not even be thinking about it anymore. And even if they are thinking about it, that's not your business. Your business is you getting visible in a way that feels right for you because you deserve it. Rejection is a part of visibility. Rejection is a part of leadership. Rejection is a part of growth. It's simply an experience that can teach you, that can strengthen you, that can direct you, but never an experience that gets to define you. Listen, wherever you're at in the world, I hope that you're safe. I hope that you're healthy, and I hope that you're well. And I certainly hope that you're giving yourself permission to start the things that you want to do and get visible in a way that feels right for you. It's always a wonder and a treat to spend time with you. And I look forward to our next episodes that will continue to be an extension of our wonderful conversation with Kat Calvin just a couple of episodes back. So, with that, you take care of yourself, and I'll see you again soon. Ciao. Welcome to Just Start, Get Visible, your go-to resource on the journey to becoming more visible in a way that feels right for you.